Here's the cruel twist. Just when you think you figured them out, they change. Or at least they pretend to. The narcissist starts talking about therapy. They admit to mistakes. They cry. They self-reflect. They use the language of healing like it's a new wardrobe. But look closer. It's not transformation. It's adaptation. See, the narcissist doesn't want to evolve. They want to survive exposure. When their masks start slipping, when people begin catching on, they don't suddenly develop self-awareness. They develop strategy. The appearance of change becomes their next manipulation tool. It's not about becoming better. It's about becoming believable again. I've seen it time and time again in divorce cases and reconciliation attempts. The narcissist shows up with a new vocabulary, words like boundaries, accountability, trauma, inner child. They've been reading, listening, mimicking. They're fluent in therapy speak, but the intent remains rotten. It's performance healing, PR for the ego. Let's get something straight. Real change takes humility. It requires discomfort, accountability, and consistency. 3 things the narcissist cannot sustain. They'll cry during the apology, maybe even show up to therapy once or twice. But once the spotlight of scrutiny fades, the old patterns resurface, sharper, more subtle, and more convincing than before. That's because to a narcissist, healing isn't about repair. It's about rebranding. When they sense you slipping away, when their control weakens, they reach for their most powerful disguise, vulnerability. They know you crave closure, progress, redemption, so they feed you the story you've been aching to hear. I've realized how I hurt you. I'm working on myself. I finally understand. And for a moment, it feels real. The tone is softer. The eyes look different. The words sound new. But remember this. The narcissist's self-reflection is a mirror with no glass. They can say the right things without ever feeling them. They can describe empathy without possessing it. It's imitation, not evolution. I once had a client, a woman named Julia, whose ex-husband, a textbook narcissist, reached out months after their divorce. He told her he'd finally started therapy and wanted to own his mistakes. Against her instincts, she listened. At first, he was calm, measured, almost insightful, but as soon as she didn't respond with admiration, as soon as she stayed detached, he snapped. The mask cracked. "You'll never forgive anyone," he spat. "You just want to stay a victim." And just like that, the illusion shattered. Because that's the giveaway. True change doesn't demand recognition. It just is. The narcissist's version of growth only exists when someone is watching, validating, believing. Without an audience, there's no transformation, just withdrawal. So when they say, "I've changed," don't look at their words, look at their patterns. Because while words can be rehearsed, consistency cannot. The most dangerous narcissist isn't the one who rages, it's the one who repents. Because repentance, when wielded as a tactic, disarms you faster than any insult ever could. The moment they start talking about growth, accountability, or healing, something in you softens. You want to believe them. After all, isn't that what you were waiting for all along? For them to finally see what they did? To finally care? That's the hook. The narcissist's performance of healing isn't for redemption, it's for access. You're not witnessing self-awareness, you're witnessing strategy. They've realized that anger, blame, and charm no longer work on you, so they switch tactics. They become the wounded philosopher, the enlightened empath, the new person, but it's just another mask. Let's call it what it is, emotional rebranding. They pivot from predator to survivor. Suddenly, the person who once dismissed therapy is quoting therapists. The same one who mocked your emotions now talks about their inner trauma. They frame their cruelty as confusion, their manipulation as unhealed wounds, and they wrap it all in the language of recovery because they know that's the only language you still respond to. I remember sitting across from a client, a strong, steady woman who had finally left her narcissistic husband after years of silent warfare. 6 months later, he sent her a long email, apologies, admissions, therapy, buzzwords sprinkled throughout. He claimed to have found himself. She called me, trembling, and said, "He sounds different. He says he finally understands." I asked her one question. "What's he asking for?" She paused. "He wants to meet for closure." And there it was, the tell, because narcissists never apologize without an agenda. The closure meeting wasn't about healing, it was about testing her emotional temperature. He wanted to see if she still cared, if he could still trigger a reaction. That's not remorse, that's reconnaissance. Narcissists study your empathy like a playbook. When direct control fails, they exploit your compassion for their growth. They'll admit to just enough wrongdoing to seem sincere, but never enough to dismantle their image. They want forgiveness without accountability, connection without correction. And when you grant them access again, the cycle quietly resets. The same old manipulation, now wrapped in the soft glow of change. Here's the cruel genius of it. They don't lie about wanting to heal. They do want to, but only to restore their power, not their integrity. They mistake introspection for image management. To them, therapy is a stage, not a process. So when you hear, "I've been working on myself," don't be fooled by the words. Ask yourself, what's changed when no one's watching? Because true growth doesn't need an audience. It doesn't seek applause. It simply shows up differently. Until you see that difference, not in talk but in time, all you're witnessing is another illusion, another act in the narcissist's endless theater of control. Here's the thing about the narcissist's so-called healing. It always looks convincing from the outside. They post motivational quotes, they talk about boundaries, they journal, meditate, maybe even attend therapy. They'll use words like energy, accountability, and growth as if they've been reborn. But if you watch closely, the cracks start to show. Because real healing doesn't make noise, it changes behavior. The narcissist's doesn't. Let's start with the first red flag. Their transformation requires an audience. True healing is a private, uncomfortable process. It's not glamorous, and it's certainly not performative. But the narcissist wants visibility. They'll talk about their journey publicly, often using it as a PR campaign. It's not, "I'm learning to be better," it's, "Look how much better I am." They don't evolve quietly, they announce it. That's the giveaway. They want to be seen healing, not be healed. The second sign is subtler but more sinister. Their empathy has conditions. Suddenly, they're self-aware, but only when it benefits them. They'll acknowledge your pain, but somehow it circles back to their suffering. "I'm sorry I hurt you, but I was in a bad place. I understand now, but you have to see what I was going through." Their apologies come wrapped in excuses, always steering the conversation back to their perspective. It's not empathy, it's rebranded self-absorption. A client once described it perfectly. It's like he became emotionally fluent, but the words were hollow, like reading a language he doesn't feel. And that's exactly it. The narcissist can mimic insight, but they can't embody it. They study emotions the way an actor studies lines. You'll hear remorse, but you won't feel it, because it's not rooted in understanding, it's rooted in preservation. Then comes the inconsistency. For a while, they seem different, calm, reflective, mature, but wait long enough, and the mask slips. The new self-aware version still gets defensive when challenged, still gaslights, but now with therapy terms. They'll tell you, "You're projecting," or "That's your trauma talking," weaponizing the very language of healing to silence you. It's the same control, just cloaked in enlightenment. And if you stop feeding their narrative, The old behavior resurfaces instantly. The charm fades, the coldness returns, and you realize nothing truly changed. It just rebranded. That's the narcissist's version of evolution. New mask, same motive. The last and most painful sign is this: their healing depends on your forgiveness. They'll pressure you to acknowledge their progress, to validate their transformation. But genuine growth doesn't demand recognition. It's quiet, steady, humble. The narcissist's healing is loud, demanding, and short-lived. It's not about closure. It's about control disguised as redemption. So when they tell you, "I've changed," remember, change doesn't need a speech. It shows up in consistency, accountability, and boundaries respected without question. Anything less isn't healing. It's strategy. And with narcissists, strategy is always about one thing: keeping you close enough to admire the illusion, but far enough that you never see the truth behind it. Therapy, healing, self-awareness. Those words mean transformation for most people, but in the hands of a narcissist, they become weapons. Once they realize they can't win through intimidation or charm, they'll use insight as a new form of control. It's not healing. It's a hostile takeover of the very language meant to expose them. I've seen it too many times to count. Clients sitting across from me, bewildered, saying, "He's in therapy now. He talks about his triggers, his trauma, his attachment issues. Shouldn't that mean progress?" I always ask the same question: has the way he treats you actually changed? The answer is almost always the same: no, but he sounds smarter about it. That's the trap. The narcissist doesn't resist therapy. They study it. They learn the vocabulary of introspection without ever doing the work. They'll pick up terms like gaslighting, projection, and emotional neglect, and before you know it, they're using them against you. You try to express your pain, and suddenly you're the one projecting. You point out their manipulation and they say, "That's your trauma talking." You become the unstable one. Again, they don't seek healing. They seek ammunition. Therapy gives them language, not empathy. They'll memorize psychological concepts the way a con artist memorizes a script, not to understand, but to perform. They know exactly what remorse sounds like, what accountability looks like, what vulnerability feels like to you, and they'll replicate it perfectly, long enough to earn your trust again. But here's the crucial difference. A healed person wants to make amends. A narcissist wants to make amends look profitable. Their therapy is a rebrand, a marketing strategy for credibility. When they say, "I'm working on myself," what they really mean is, "I'm learning new ways to justify myself." One of my clients, an experienced mediator, described her ex's transformation perfectly. He didn't get better. He got more articulate. Same manipulation, new dictionary. That's exactly it. They evolve just enough to seem enlightened, but never enough to be accountable. They'll even use their therapist's words as shields. "My therapist says I'm growing, you're just holding on to resentment." Translation: don't question me. I've outsourced my accountability to a professional. And make no mistake, some therapists get played too. Narcissists can charm professionals just like they charm partners. They present the perfect patient, insightful, remorseful, committed. Meanwhile, they use therapy to refine their manipulation. The mask gets smarter, smoother, more convincing. The ultimate manipulation is this: they make you doubt your recovery by flaunting theirs. You start questioning if you're the bitter one, if maybe they really have changed. But here's the truth. People who change don't need to prove it. They live it, quietly, consistently, without spectacle. So when a narcissist says, "I'm healing," don't listen to their words, watch their impact. If the peace still feels one-sided, if the blame still circles back to you, if your voice still feels small, then nothing's changed. They're not healed. They're just better at hiding the wound they keep infecting others with. Once the narcissist has learned the vocabulary of therapy, They often take it a step further. They weaponize spirituality, forgiveness, and energy work. Suddenly, they're not just in therapy, they're awakened. They've transcended old patterns. They're on a path of self-love and higher consciousness. And to the untrained eye, it can look convincing, even admirable. But here's the catch. In a narcissist, spirituality isn't enlightenment. It's armor. It's another mask, another tool for manipulation. I've seen clients reel when their exes suddenly preach mindfulness, energy healing, or the power of forgiveness. He's changed, they say. He talks about karma and letting go. But watch closely. The language of ascension isn't about genuine growth. It's about controlling the narrative. If you question their behavior, they'll respond, "You're not aligned with my energy," or "You're holding on to negative vibrations." In other words, your reasonable boundaries suddenly become moral failings. Your skepticism becomes a spiritual flaw. That's the brilliance of the tactic. It flips the moral compass. You're no longer resisting abuse. You're blocking energy. You're not asserting self-respect. You're vibrating at a low frequency. The narcissist doesn't need to apologize or change. They just need to frame your reaction as the problem. And because spirituality and morality are difficult to argue with, it creates confusion, guilt, and self-doubt. Forgiveness becomes a weapon too. They'll tell you they've forgiven themselves, implying that you should forgive them. But real forgiveness in human growth isn't performative, it's quiet and steady. The narcissist, however, uses it as a performance, a way to earn moral high ground without altering behavior. You're meant to feel indebted to them, to admire their evolution, while the patterns of manipulation remain intact. Energy work, affirmations, even meditation, all can be twisted into tools of control. They're used to obscure the old behaviors, making it seem as though the narcissist has become someone new. But beneath the surface, the same ego-driven impulses remain. The chaos, the self-centeredness, the manipulation, all of it just has a softer, shinier exterior. Here's the key. True change doesn't require validation from its targets. Real healing shows in consistent respect, accountability, and a steady emotional presence, not in Instagram posts, manifestos, or proclamations of moral evolution. If the person still triggers guilt, confusion, or self-doubt, nothing has truly changed. The mask has just been upgraded. I tell clients, watch the actions, not the aura. Words about energy, forgiveness, or enlightenment mean nothing without the proof of behavior. A narcissist may claim to have reached a higher plane, but if they can still manipulate, control, or hurt you, the illusion of change remains just that, an illusion. And that's the heartbreak of it. The narcissist's transformation is seductive precisely because it feels possible. You want it to be real, you hope it is, but hope is their playground. And until you learn to measure change by consistency and respect, the cycle continues. Here's the harsh reality. The narcissist's growth is often most dangerous when it looks believable. When they sprinkle therapy speak into arguments, quote spiritual texts, or flaunt new habits, it creates a tempting mirage. And the temptation is real, because part of you wants to believe in change. You want the person you once loved to finally become someone worthy of your trust. But that desire is exactly what they exploit. The first line of defense is awareness. Real change is quiet, consistent, and self-driven. It doesn't need to be showcased on social media, narrated in long emails, or packaged with apologies designed to provoke a reaction. A narcissist's transformation is always performative, tailored to earn your validation. Their goal is never growth, it's access. Access to your empathy, your attention, your emotional energy. Watch for subtle patterns. Are they apologizing but quickly shifting blame? Are their new insights always accompanied by ways to excuse past behavior? Do they demand recognition for their progress while you're still processing the impact of their past actions? That's a red flag. True accountability doesn't require applause. It requires action. Real growth changes behavior, not just language. Next, pay attention to triggers. The narcissist will test your boundaries under the guise of healing. They might say, "I've changed. Why can't you forgive me?" Or, "I'm working on myself. Why are you still upset?" If you react emotionally, they've scored another point in their manipulation. They're not seeking reconciliation. They're evaluating your vulnerability. Your response tells them whether the illusion still works. Another tactic is the slow drip of charm. They'll offer thoughtful gestures, moments of kindness, or insights that appear profound. It's seductive because it feels earned. You might think, maybe this is the new person. But ask yourself, are the patterns truly different? Or is this just selective performance? Do these gestures disrupt the cycle of manipulation? Or are they strategically timed to keep you hooked? Finally, trust your instincts. Narcissists can fool your logic with eloquence, but they can't override your gut. If you feel anxious, confused, or manipulated despite their progress, that feeling is your internal radar sounding the alarm. It's not paranoia, it's perception honed by experience. Honor it, set firm boundaries, detach emotionally, and watch for consistency, not promises. Remember, the illusion of change is a tool, not a transformation. A narcissist may appear to evolve, but unless their actions consistently align with respect, accountability, and integrity, nothing has truly shifted. They've just dressed the same old self in a new costume. More sophisticated, more convincing, but no less dangerous. Your defense is clarity, observation, and self-trust. By demanding consistency over spectacle, you neutralize the power of their illusion and reclaim control over your emotional landscape. Here's the final truth about narcissists and their so-called transformation. The change you hope to see isn't meant for you. It's a performance designed to maintain influence, secure admiration, and manipulate perception. And the more convincing it seems, the more dangerous it is, because it can lure you back into patterns you thought you'd escaped. The narcissist's healing cycle has a predictable rhythm. They recognize a loss of control. They adopt the language of self-awareness. They stage gestures of empathy or accountability, and they use these signals to pull you in again. The goal is never true reconciliation or growth. It's emotional leverage. They want to test whether you'll forgive, respond, or doubt yourself. If you do, they win. If you don't, they refine the act, waiting for the next opportunity. I have seen countless clients fall into this trap, convinced they're witnessing a genuine transformation. The ex who suddenly understands trauma. The partner who quotes therapists or spiritual texts. The co-parent who claims they've changed for the sake of the children. Each of these is seductive because it appeals to the part of you that hopes for redemption, for repair, for closure. But hope can be the most dangerous bridge in a relationship with a narcissist. It's where the cycle begins anew. So, how do you protect yourself? First, measure change by action, not words. True growth doesn't require performance. It doesn't need validation. It shows up in consistency, accountability, and respect for boundaries every single day in ways that leave no room for ambiguity. If those behaviors aren't present, what you're witnessing is an illusion. Second, trust your instincts. That feeling of unease, that nagging doubt, is your internal radar alerting you to patterns you've already experienced. Don't silence it. Don't rationalize it. If your gut says something is off, it probably is. Third, maintain your boundaries. The narcissist's acts of apparent growth are designed to test your limits. Responding emotionally or bending your rules hands them the leverage they seek. Silence, detachment, and clarity are your greatest defenses. Let the words fall on deaf ears if they're not backed by consistent action. Finally, reclaim your narrative. The narcissist will always try to rewrite the story, painting themselves as enlightened, remorseful, or morally superior. Don't let them. Your experience is real, and their illusion cannot erase it. Document it, reflect on it, and let it guide your decisions about distance and engagement. Here's the ultimate lesson. True change isn't performative. It doesn't need applause, recognition, or forgiveness from those it harmed. Real transformation is quiet, steady, and grounded in respect for others' boundaries. Anything else is a strategy, a mask worn by someone who never intended to evolve. By recognizing the illusion of change, you reclaim your power. You stop chasing an image and start observing reality. You stop hoping for repair and start expecting accountability. And most importantly, you free yourself from the cycle of manipulation, emotional whiplash, and false hope. Because when you measure change by truth instead of words, you finally step off the stage of their performance and into your own life.